Welcome to a very special edition of Addiction to Recovery. This podcast is normally hosted by the brilliant Pete and Kieran from the Dynamo Project. However, this episode is a little bit different. To celebrate their 1 year anniversary, we thought it'd be a good idea to go right back to the beginning on how it all started, and that's with the main man himself, Kieran.
Pete won't like you
Yeah,
referring to me as the main man.
Sorry. Well, he could have been here
You're
to
right,
sit down.
though. I'm
Yeah,
only
yeah,
joking.
exactly.
Me and Pete are both the main men.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Don't
I'm
tell
a
him I said
dad.
that. But no, it's a
And
really
Claire.
interesting kind of way of doing this, because obviously we've been producing the podcast for you guys since day one. I'm a huge fan of what you do, and from
Thank you.
Coventry and just in general,
Yeah.
the kind of impact that you've had. How does it feel kind of going into the 1 year anniversary?
It's quite a surreal feeling because a big part of why I started the Dynamo Project is I didn't want people just to see the Dynamo Project as an organisation. I almost want people to think, when they think of Dynamo Project, they think of Kieran, Pete and Claire, and it makes it more human. And I think if people are looking for help and support, it's almost slightly easier to come to us because we have put faces to the name, and that was part of my thinking. But in any business, Taylor, you will know this,
Yeah.
when you started what you do, to get to a year one is it's very, very difficult. And a lot of people start off with wonderful ideas, great endeavors, but ultimately a lot of them fall by the wayside.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't for the support that I get off my family and those around me, I too could have fell by the wayside. But thankfully, we're very nearly 1 year old. And I think it's like sometimes you tap into that, whether you're talking from ego or making it all about me. It's not all about me, but I feel very proud.
Oh, so you should.
Yeah, of what we have done as a team to reach 1 year old, and feels kind of surreal. Have we achieved anything by getting to 1 year? I think so, but there's so much more we need to do. We need to carry on working hard. I don't know how many mistakes I've made in this first year, but what I need to do is make sure I don't make them mistakes in year two. No doubt I'll make new mistakes in year two, then not to make them in year three. So it's a learning curve. I think I'm learning on the job.
Of course you are. And it's fair, I don't think that kind of learning ever stops. And one of the things that I'd respect you and the whole team for is that you've kind of taken those almost like the losses, the pain, and you have turned it into not only your purpose or kind of the lesson.
Yeah.
You're now kind of giving back to this whole community that it's so empowering, because you only have to kind of mention Dynamo and automatically, especially in Coventry, they know who you're talking about. You've built such a community that is, you only have to see on social media, and how kind of empowering it is, that you're championing these people that, you've lived through that experience yourself. So
Yeah.
to now be in a position 1 year on over something that it was created out of the pain and kind of for yourself, to now being able to I am doing this. It'd be weird if you sat here and said you weren't proud.
Yeah.
In fact, I'd probably ask you to leave
Yeah.
your own podcast.
Yeah. I'd probably say no. I'd probably say yes, because I'm a people pleaser to the core, and I'd be off.
But to be fair, getting back to the kind of the podcast side of things, obviously you start each one of your shows with a question that has been left by the previous guest.
Correct,
which is some of the answers to this. Genuinely, I have to fight back the tears sometimes when I'm sat over there, listening to this conversation. No, I'm very sensitive. But they've been so empowering, and it's just, regardless if you're struggling with addiction or any kind of that, even listening to that gives you that kind of confidence and I can do anything kind of thing. But obviously the last guest that you had on was the brilliant Kevin, and
also my sponsor.
Yes, I didn't know that until today.
Just now, yeah.
Brilliant guy.
I trusted him to help me, so he had his work cut out. But we have a really good relationship, and I thought he was a brilliant guest. So I can't remember the question he left. I hope you do.
Of course, but it's my job to know. But it was the way he kind of articulated is probably going to be a lot better than the way I
Yeah,
articulate it. But it was around the kind of like the journey and the opening up and around the experience.
yeah.
It's quite. I feel like this is quite a difficult one to answer. But he said,
Okay.
"Is there one word that would describe your experience so far?"
I can look at it from two ways. I think the answer that comes into my head straight away is challenging. It is. People may think that being in recovery from addiction issues is not so challenging, but I find it very challenging to be in recovery. I'm my own worst enemy. But the one word, I think I'm going to change the word. The one word I would describe my journey so far is humility. That's the word I would use,
Wow.
because humility is a massive part of my life, and without humility, I wouldn't stay clean. So I'm going to say my first answer was challenging, but I think on reflection, I'm going to say the answer to that question would be the word humility.
That's a powerful position to be in, mate. So just to give you the heads up with this, you got a bit of time. Obviously, we'll have a bit of a chat about the journey so far to get to this point.
Okay.
You do realize you're going to have to think of a question now to ask
Yeah,
the next guest. So just to pre-warn you on your own show.
Yeah, okay. It's got to be a good one, hasn't it?
Exactly, no pressure. But let's go back then. So how did this kind of like journey start for you? Obviously, you kind of like dissect like your guests in a way that you kind of start from the childhood, because from listening to the podcast, it's very much like there seems to be a recurring theme that this is where certain themes and certain challenges or even trauma like starts from an early age. Like, what was your childhood like?
100%. I think a lot of people, when you say, if you go out there into society and you mention the word addiction, most probably people will go drugs, alcohol. It's almost the go-to word, isn't it? But from doing the work on myself, and from helping those around me, a lot of addiction stems from the times before we've even picked up a drink or a drug. And when I refer to doing my work on myself, for me, it's the step work. Also, I'm part of a 12-step program, so a lot of my the work I've done took me back into my younger years, and I've heard some horrendous stories of people's childhoods, horrendous, and you're listening to them, and you'd go, I can see how you've ended up the way you ended up. What chance did you have? But I'm the opposite way. I grew up in a very loving home. My mum and dad couldn't do enough for me. Everything I needed, I had. I had food, roof over my head, and for whatever reason, I ended up where I ended up. But I found my childhood I didn't have a traumatic childhood, but I found parts of it traumatic. And that's not because of what was done to me. Nothing was ever done to me, and I had everything that a child would need. But I don't understand why I found it so traumatic in terms of, particularly with school.
Yeah, which is a difficult place to navigate, regardless of what walk of life you're from.
I was unbelievably naughty at school, and I was speaking to my dad about this last night, just in a general conversation. And I remember being in school in the classroom, and I don't know how old I was, but I was young. It was definitely primary school, and I remember looking around and thinking, why am I different to everyone else? I just felt different. I don't know what it was. And I had real behavioural issues. And my mum, back in primary school, my dad took over in secondary school. But in primary school, I was brought up in Radford, and I went to St Augustine's, and my mum was forever in and out of that school. And it was the same. I was never like nasty or bad. It was just misbehaved all the time. And it got to the point where I weren't even allowed to take part in lunchtime. My mum had to come and pick me up and take me home for lunch and drop me back in. I wasn't allowed to be within because I was probably having a negative effect on them. All my school reports were the same every year. And my mum had to go and see the teacher every single Friday. And the teacher may as well have just done a template, because nothing ever changed. But I remember, I now know it to be anxiety. I was always on edge at school, and I think I believe anxiety has a lot to say from the way my life turned out.
With that, because obviously when we were in school, like the whole anxiety thing wasn't really
I wasn't spoken about.
no, like the absolutely no. I mean, until recently, I don't think it's even like
Yeah,
the past 5 years I've understood what anxiety is. From doing the work that you're doing now, like obviously not only on yourself but with others, do you notice kind of like almost like traits that you're ah, like that you can either relate to or you can kind of almost
yeah,
advise people on?
yeah. Because people, like I said, people think addiction is to do with substances, right? But for me, addiction is about it's to do with your behaviors. Yeah. So if it was, I always say this, if it was only about drugs, then every single person out there who's took drugs would become addicted.
Mhm.
That's not the case. So there has to be something more to it. And my behaviors were erratic from day one. The one thing I know from when I was young is I craved other people's acceptance.
Okay.
I wanted to be part of so much. So I'm a chronic people pleaser. And I would just do anything just to get validation of others. My opinion on myself didn't matter. It was what you thought of
Yeah.
me, and that's what my self worth come from what
Yeah.
somebody else thought of me.
Have you ever kind of tried to address where that comes from, or have you got like almost an answer for that? Yeah.
No, I think there's only so. This is what I say to people. There's only so much focus you can put on why something
Mm.
is the way it is. Then you have to almost shift your focus into what. And what are you going to do about this? Because if you're forever trying to work out why, you lose sight of what you need to do to turn your life around. So you have to get a balance in that. You have to understand why. You also have to understand what you need to do to change your life around. I think sometimes, for me personally, I like to look for an answer to go, that's why I do that. I like to hide behind that. Like when I was on drugs, all these, I'll go into a bit later on, but it was chaos, it was carnage. And if someone said, "What's going on with Kieran?" I'm on drugs. That's why. And then when I put the
Mm.
drugs down and I remain clean, the same things were happening. I'm like, "What's going on, Kieran?" I'm like, it's not the drugs.
So I haven't got an
Yeah,
excuse for
but the
this.
drugs, like everything else, is an external excuse. And in the end, I ran out of all the external excuses, and I was left with no option to look within. You know, I am the reason why I do what I do, and I think my school I found school traumatic. I didn't feel like I fitted in school.
Did that transition kind of, or even that kind of journey into secondary school, which is a horrible thing to do, regardless of what you're
Secondary
thinking.
school.
What does that look like?
I went to Cardinal Newman.
Oh,
I
I
went
went
to
to Wiseman.
Oh, you went to Wiseman. So did my mum and
Oh.
dad. Yeah, they're from that
That was their
side.
first mistake. That's where they went.
Yeah, I think it was separated. I think it was separated. Then they must have met on the bus or something.
Yeah.
But I went to Newman, and I found it difficult in Newman, and through nobody else's fault.
Mm,
I was an absolute idiot at school, and I mean that right. I was a prick at
mm.
school, and I look back now, and I used to like pick on people, not in a bad way, but I liked it when somebody else was getting picked on, and because I knew they weren't going to pick on me for
Yeah.
a bit. But I was, yeah, I found secondary school quite traumatic. Just again, I'm very good at I'd putting masks on, and I try and act in a way that I thought other people wanted me to act.
You're a chameleon.
Yeah,
Mm.
in a way, and then people wouldn't like that person, and it wasn't even the real me. That makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, no,
And
complete
I was
sense.
too scared that if they got to know the real me, that they wouldn't like me. But maybe they would have liked me. I don't know. But I think if people from school were to speak about me, it'd probably be he was a bit of a right. Can I swear? A bit of a twat.
It's your podcast. I'm
Yeah,
just here to ask the
yeah,
questions. You
yeah.
do what
But
you want.
I was very troubled in the classroom.
Mm.
I was always misbehaving. I was always sent out of class. I think at one point, whether it was in year 7 or 8, I was removed from the classroom for a while and put into a classroom with other kids like me. So that was just misbehaving,
Yeah.
and I didn't get on with school at all, to be honest with you.
You mentioned primary school, your mom did the
Yeah,
kind of like the in and
yeah.
outs and kind of thing. But then you also mentioned that your dad did
Oh,
secondary, and
yeah,
you
it
kind of
switched.
made a
Yeah,
little bit of a laugh about it.
yeah, yeah,
Was that a dynamic, like a shift in dynamic, sorry,
yeah,
with the kind of different parental role?
yeah. I think my mom, to be fair, by the time I left primary school, I don't think my mom necessarily deals with conflict
Mm,
best, and it's, she just probably doesn't want to hear the same things about her son
yeah.
week after week. So when I went to secondary school, I think because my dad was at work and my mum was only across the road from primary school, then my dad sort of took over that role. And I know if it wasn't for my dad, I would have been kicked out. I think he was in there fighting my corner many, many times.
Mm,
I would never go to school. I'd just skip school and
yeah.
just go spend the day. I normally go to Cowan Park. I'd go sit in Cowan Park, but that's probably where I had my first dabble with drugs, was in
Yeah.
secondary school. And a lot of people say peer pressure. I don't think I was victim of peer
Mm.
pressure, but I think because I saw other people doing it, I wanted to
What
be part of
was,
that
because
clan.
obviously you asked this question quite a lot,
Yeah,
between you and Pete,
yeah,
and I always find it really fascinated, like the drug of choice
yeah,
or the alcohol of choice and stuff, and
yeah.
what age it kind. What, obviously you said secondary school, so what age and what was the first kind of substance that you
I think
obviously dealt with?
I'm going to say it would have started with cigarettes.
Yeah.
'Cause nicotine's a drug.
Yep.
But I remember smoking for the very first time. I absolutely hated it. Back in them days, you save twos, thirds, or beef.
Do you know what? I haven't heard that. I don't think I've heard that for about 5,
Yeah,
6
and I think that's the only conversation you've heard. Twos up, thirds up,
Yeah.
beef, and that was probably my first like substance I took was a cigarette, and then remember draw.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
blocks of
yeah.
draw. I remember taking that. I remember smoking weed early on. That didn't go down well. I
No.
had a I had a bad time on that. And then sort of alcohol sort of come in. Um, but I think I think Pete was very quite young when he tried substances. I was probably a little bit older.
Yeah.
But I remember drinking for the first time, and probably like most teenagers, I'm no different. I liked how it made me feel.
Yeah.
But I knew early on that I would drink and not stop. I didn't understand that at the time, but I look back now and I'd get drunk to completion. But it wasn't until I was a little bit older, I don't think.
Yeah.
I wasn't really drinking at school, so to speak. I was just misbehaving at
Yeah.
school. I remember once I nicked teachers' handbags, just like thief. I was a
Stupid. Yeah,
thief.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I remember one time one of the lads told me to put through the window at RE. I just did it without thinking.
Mm,
Unbeknownst to me, the class was in there, and
yeah.
there's me stood by the window. So I got suspended for that. But I got suspended a
But then
lot.
if you're looking, like you said, like even from like primary school and stuff, if you are a people pleaser and
Yeah,
you are looking for that
yeah,
acceptance, you are going to do those kind of things, like to kind of feel like you're part of
yeah. I'm
something. Or
very, very easily led. Very easily led. Um, I think I'm better now. People may disagree, but I
yeah,
think I'm better. But at school, it's like if I saw someone with something on and somebody else commented, "Oh, that looks well cool,"
mm,
I had to have what that person was
yeah,
wearing. It was mad. I'm very obsessive.
yeah.
It's like
So
my mates used to fancy different girls, right?
yeah,
Throughout the school year, but for whatever reason, I just fancied the same girl.
yeah.
I just
With that, so obviously you are very open about your addiction journey. Obviously, we'll,
yeah,
we'll kind of like dive into it a little bit more.
yeah,
Obviously, the days kind of like after school,
yeah,
but there was obviously a layer of addictive behavior before
100%.
you'd like,
Yeah,
which you said it, like before you'd
yeah.
even kind of touched any kind of
Yeah,
substance.
definitely. I'm very obsessive. I'm very compulsive, um, and that's something that I recognise from my younger days.
Yeah.
Chronic people pleaser. All the ingredients are there for someone that's going to suffer
Mm.
with addiction issues later on in life.
So what happened after school then? You've gone through that kind of like weird kind of trying to figure out who you are kind of phase of secondary school. What did life look like once you'd left school?
So, in my GCSEs, I didn't do very
Mm.
well, and then I think I stayed on a sixth form to do GMVQ or something like
Yeah.
that. And I was there for a year. I think I was there for a year. I didn't do very well in the outcome of that. But I think when I got to 16 to 18, and I was in sixth form, I was just starting to go out. I've got a group of friends who I still see to this day,
Yeah.
and I still class them as friends. Although in my using, I didn't bother with any of them, and so I lost contact with them for a lot of years. But I fell into a settled group of friends in sixth form, and we would do the things that most teenagers would do. We was down the collie on a Friday night. I'd go down there with a tenner.
You'd come back with change as well
Yeah,
in
but
those days.
I'd walk down there. I'd walk there from my house all the way down to the collie, and then walk all the way back. So I had a tenner to spend on drinks. But it was quite happy times. I was playing football, and I had a job at JJB. Remember JJB? It's
Yes.
where the Empire is.
Yeah.
I got a job there, and things were okay. I believe anyway.
So was there a trigger point? Because obviously, from the outside looking in, everything that you're kind of saying is like it's fairly standard childhood, like
Yeah.
nothing was there a trigger point that made you turn to kind of like the
Um,
substances?
I don't know. It's a difficult question to answer. I think I've always suffered with uh, low self-esteem,
Yeah.
low self-worth. My opinion of myself, even to this day, isn't good.
Yeah.
And it's something that I do need to work on. But I sometimes look in the mirror and I don't like what looks back at me, and I think I need to do some work around that. Either the people will say, you're doing well, Kieran, and all that, but ultimately,
Until you see it, it's
what was I talking about then?
Just about like the trigger points, like about like having low
Yeah.
self-esteem and
But like I said, I'm a very obsessive person, and I remember when I was about 4 or 5, we lived on Wallace Road in Radford, and or Kersley, whatever it was, and it got burgled. All right, I'm not laughing 'cause it's funny, but Mum and Dad didn't find it funny.
yeah.
But I remember being in the back room, and someone walked in, and I looked up, and it may as well have been a giant.
Wow.
I was like, wow, and it was a policeman. Obviously, he's come round to do some like what's going on with the burglary.
Oh, I thought you were going to say it was the burglar then.
No,
I thought my heart dropped then.
No, it might have been. He might have been in disguise. But I
Yeah.
was like, wow, and I remember I was mesmerised. He had all the gear on,
Yeah.
and I was like, get out. And then from then on, I was obsessed with becoming a police officer.
From such a young age.
Yeah. And I remember at school they'd do like career days. What do you want to be?
Yeah.
And everyone knew what I was going to say was to be a police officer. And then I remember my teacher went, "You're never going to be a police officer.
Yeah.
You're too naughty." But that come from then, and no other job ever come into my head other than becoming a police officer.
But then there's also something quite impressive about that, though.
Yeah,
Because the fact that if you knew from such an early age that's what I want to do,
yeah,
you need to give yourself a bit of credit because you also made that happen.
yeah. I am a very driven person, but I'm enabled to focus on multiple things.
Yeah.
And once I get something in my head, I find that it consumes me, and that's
Yeah.
what. And I also knew at the time that you didn't really need like fancy qualifications back then to become a police officer. I think it's changed now.
Yeah.
I think it's changed now. So, but back then, I don't think you needed them, and so that's why I decided to join the police.
I was about to say, so obviously that's leading on to the kind of like the question around like your time in the police force.
Yeah.
How much can you talk about that? Because obviously I imagine there's obviously a lot of kind of stuff
I
you
talk,
can't, but
I talk openly. So I joined the police in 2000 and I think it was 2007,
okay.
December 2007, or it might have been early 2008. I can't. I've had a lot of drugs since then. I can't remember. I can't remember what I did this morning.
And also you throw like a pandemic in there, like do you know what I mean? It's been a while.
I think it was definitely, it might have been 2008. It was I don't know when it was anyway. And I joined, I was 20. I was 20, very, very young, very young. But when I joined the police, I knew it made my mum and dad really proud. And that's something that I'd never made them, I don't think, in terms of my achievements. There might be moments in my life where I wasn't always bad, but I think they were quite proud that the son had become a police officer. So yeah, I joined that. I was only young, and I felt part of, because it's quite a good community within the police. But I joined the police. This is a true story. I joined the police on a Monday, and then you trained on you trained in Birmingham, and then you go on an 18-week classroom course. I think it's different now. I don't know. Anyway, so we started on the Monday. That Friday come, and then the following Friday we got issued our warrant cards. Right, so we went out to celebrate, and I got absolutely hammered. I was down Icon, absolutely hammered, and I was waving my warrant card around to get in clubs, and I got locked up.
Oh,
yeah, I got arrested. Yeah, I'd only been in a cop for 10 days or 14 days. Yeah, so back then there was like a copper sergeant that was in charge of the new recruits, and the first time I met him was in the office to explain why I'd been arrested, waving my warrant card around. So I was almost going into, because then I was in Birmingham and then I got based in Coventry, but all the management knew about me because I was the police officer that got arrested. He'd only been a cop for 2 minutes.
Did that affect anything? Like,
I very nearly lost my job.
I was about to say, could that have prevented your
very nearly lost my job. It went on for ages. I had to complete all my training with that hanging over me. But yeah, it's just, you know.
And what is a warrant card? Sorry,
you know what the police badge.
Oh, okay, yeah.
You know, if someone asks for ID, you show them your warrant card. But it's quite a big event when you get given it.
Yeah, but even getting to like 18 and showing like your ID, like, I'm finally old enough to actually legally be in here. So
I wanted to let people. Because I've been so used to letting people down, like, you know, and I just wanted to let people know that I'm trying to. A police officer look at me, and it's all nonsense now. But I was only 20, you know, but it was So people still no doubt that's what it's all about now. Anyway.
Moving forward, then, so obviously I know Kieran now.
Yeah.
Obviously, I didn't know like you, obviously, like growing up or anything like that. In between the career in the police to obviously the opening of the Dynamo Project, what happened? Because obviously this is almost like polar opposite kind of career paths.
I reckon for the first 4 years of being in the police, things were going well. I was just working, and obviously I was going out getting things. But I had a relationship breakdown, which was completely my fault.
Yeah.
And I know I caused a lot of upset and devastation around that. This was in 2011. And I was meant to be. I was getting married.
Wow.
I was getting married, and down to my actions, I won't go into why, but down to my actions, the wedding never happened.
Yeah.
And I think that had a real, and it's difficult because I caused so much pain to other people. So when I say that it caused me a mental breakdown, I don't think it's going to carry much weight, but I think it did. And that was in 2011, August 2011, I was due to get married. It obviously didn't go ahead, and there was a lot of fallout around that. And it led to me going on the piss a lot more. And I was out one night. I was down the Holyhead on a Sunday night. I'd been on the all dayer, and someone offered me a line of coke. And I was still a police officer at this point, and I'd never touched cocaine. I don't know how old, early 20s. I don't know how old I was. And I don't know why. Who knows? Doesn't matter now. But I had this line of coke, and it made me feel magical.
Yeah.
It made me feel magical. It made me feel alive. Now, all of a sudden, I felt this overwhelming desire to go and to talk to people. It gave me the confidence that I'd always lacked, and I went down Jack's.
Sunday night Jack's, 2 for 1.
Sunday night Jack's, and I had one line. That's all I had. One line, and I say I had the best night ever. I know I didn't have the best night ever, but at the time, I was euphoric, and I couldn't believe that one bag of powder could make me feel that way. I understand what happens now.
But listening to kind of like what you have kind of said about like primary school, secondary school, and like bits and bobs that you've said just obviously in this conversation, it almost like, from what I heard, sorry, I don't want to put words into your mouth, but it was almost like that kind of like bag of powder almost became the answer
100%
to everything.
100%. And my decline from that point to where it ended up was rapid. was rapid.
Okay.
So I was drinking a lot. I'm still, imagine going to work as a police officer and you've been on drugs the night before. It was
Yeah.
such.
It's almost like a big contradiction, isn't it?
And I just felt I was ashamed of myself. But each night out, I couldn't go without it. I couldn't. I had to have cocaine with me, and in the end, I was on payday loans
Yeah.
almost immediately, and it just my whole life fell apart in a blink of an eye. And I'm trying to deal with my mental health had deteriorated. I was on we call it on the sesh, don't we?
Yeah,
I was on the sesh
yeah.
all the time, and at the same time trying to balance my career as a police officer. And
It's two different lives, though.
it was absolutely crazy. And the wheels fell off, and I think people at work started to see something wasn't quite right. And in their way, they tried to help me. I remember they transferred me over to Birmingham.
Yeah.
A change of location, a change of scenery may do me good, but I was already on that slippery slope, and there's no stopping it. And I remember that. I remember. Now I can talk about this. I remember going to a job. I was single crewed, and that's what they mean when you work on your own.
Yeah.
And a woman had called about some domestic incident. It doesn't matter what it specifically it was. And I remember that I'd been on drugs heavily the night before, and I was on the dual carriageway. I can't remember the road in Birmingham. Blues and twos going, and I remember thinking, "Fuck me, how unlucky is this woman to be going through this scenario?
Yeah.
She's called for help, and she's getting me drugs in my
Wow.
system, blues and twos, putting other people's life in danger." I remember I pulled over and just broke down crying, and I had to say, "I can't do this." And I remember speaking to my sergeant. I'd been ringing in sick a lot.
Yeah.
I think my granddad died about 10 times. Just that thing of, oh, I got my
Yeah.
granddad died. Just
Yeah.
lies to the thing off. They knew something wasn't right. And I went in one day and they took me off shift. They said, you can't go out there no more. I'm putting myself in danger. I'm putting my colleagues in danger. I'm putting the public in danger. And I remember saying them words, I can't stop taking cocaine, to the duty gaffer or whatever it was. And that was it. I handed in my warrant card, and I never went back again. That was it.
Wow. My next question was literally going to be like, was there almost like a rock bottom? Would you kind of describe that as a rock bottom, or was
I
there
always
like
tell
further
this story,
fallout?
and it makes people laugh, but it's not funny. But it's like it gives an indication of how in the madness I was. I remember ringing my dealer saying I ordered an eighth or whatever it was. And he said, yeah, I'll be there in 10 minutes. I said, all right. So off I go. I drive there, and I'm sat outside his house. He's not coming down. I'm desperate here. I need drugs. I rang him. I said, listen, where are you? And he said, listen, Kieran, I can't come out. The old biller outside. And I realised in that moment I was on duty.
You were in the police
I was
car.
in a police car. And I know people laugh when I tell them that, but that's how the obsession, isn't that bad? But little did he know, I was the old bill.
Flash twice if it's you.
Yeah, but that's like an example that nothing else mattered in my life other than getting drugs. I would go there in me police car and police uniforms, pick up drugs.
Yeah.
No wonder he wouldn't come out. He didn't
hell,
know what's got far. So I remember driving back and saying I'm ill and going back in my normal car.
With that then, was there like what was the turning point? Because obviously going from having this career, like making the parents proud, like having that kind of feeling like I'm doing something kind of good.
When I left the police, it was a massive relief.
Okay.
I just remember feeling this weight lifted off my shoulders. Not that I was going to stop using drugs.
Yeah.
My head says now you can use drugs and not worry about being caught at work. But when I left the police, that's when my life went into absolute carnage. That's when it was, and that's not the police's fault for me going. That's my fault. But that's when it just went into oblivion, because I had no reason whatsoever to want to try and change my ways.
When you're saying like oblivion and like chaos and stuff like that, like what can you kind of give me a bit of
drug taking that's all I was interested in. I was using drugs every single day, doing anything I could to get them drugs. My flat became squalor essentially. I remember looking out the window once, and I had a Vauxhall Vectra, and I remember the low loader coming in, just putting it on the back of the lorry and pissing off, and I weren't bothered.
Well, to be fair, when you're in that kind of
Yeah.
headspace and stuff, like, it's just kind of like, well, the worst is happening.
Yeah.
So
And then I thought it'd be a good idea to get a job down the Holyhead. I went down the Holyhead and got a job. You know, there's me struggling with drinking alcohol, so I thought I'd work in the Holyhead, and
yeah,
that went tits up. I ended up getting arrested from there one night, fighting or whatever it was, and I've been arrested a few times now. Been arrested a few times, and you know, that's embarrassing when you go into the custody station and there's
seeing
people there that know
ex-colleagues,
you, and
yeah.
there's me, and yeah, it's bad times.
What was the turning point?
I was in a new relationship at that point, and I can't remember when that relationship started, but I went to when I left the Holyhead, and my mum, everyone knew I was struggling with drugs now. This wasn't a
Yeah.
secret; it was out in the open. You know, I remember telling people I've got a problem with drugs, and thinking that they didn't know. They're like, we know.
Yeah.
I thought I was dead secretive,
Yeah.
but everybody knew.
Well, at least you, like, to be fair though, there isn't a level of like honesty there though with you.
Yeah. I'm my own worst critic, but yeah. So when I had no other option. So I went to work at my dad's factory because my dad's got a business over in Bedworth, and I just went to work in the factory over there, and I was sweeping up and stuff, and that was my life for a little while, and I was there for a good few years, right up until the point I left to start the project.
Yeah.
But my drug taking was still rife then, and yeah, at times.
I'm going to go back to the question because
Yeah.
you kind of skirted past.
Yeah, I can't remember the question. I just waffle.
What was the turn? Hey,
That's
for my
yeah,
show.
all right.
What was the turning point? You've realised, obviously,
So-
was there support there, or like, I need to do this for me?
Yeah, I remember. So there's a word that's in recovery called powerlessness. I am going to answer your question right now. Powerlessness, when you feel powerless. Now, I never knew what that word meant, but I was very heavy on drugs when my daughter's mum was pregnant. All right, very difficult to talk about because I was trying to think of the right word, scumbag, basically.
Right.
But I always thought to myself, when my child's born, I'll stop using drugs. And I thought, no, because no one wants to use drugs when they've got a baby.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I built it up in my head that when the baby's here, I had a daughter. I didn't know at the point I was having a daughter. When my daughter was here, that would be when I stopped using drugs. I was almost looking forward. I was looking forward to obviously being a dad, but looking forward to I was naive. Thought, great.
It was like a new life, isn't it?
Yeah. And I remember holding my daughter for the first time, and I was overwhelmed with this emotion. Obviously, the emotion of holding my daughter for the first time and being a dad, but it was emotion that was I knew in that moment I couldn't stop, and it was a very I can't pinpoint a word to describe how that made me feel. I was holding her, looking at her, and the very first thought I had when I saw my daughter was I felt sorry for her to be born into this world and to have me as a dad. It was such a difficult time in my life, and it's mad to think about it. And I really struggled with being a dad because I just didn't. I always thought she was better off without me.
Yeah.
Why does she deserve to be born into the world and have a dad like me? I just felt really sorry for her. Imagine looking at your own daughter, feeling sorry for her when you're meant to be there to protect your kid. You know, and I couldn't protect her. You know, and my drug using it went from out of control to when Freya was here, it became to the point where I was using to hurt myself. It became nasty. Is that me? It became nasty. And I'd use and I'd look in the mirror and just shout obscenities at myself. You scumbag. And that took me to a very, very dark place. So my she's 8.5 now. I've been clean for nearly 3 years. So that gives you an indication that drugs was part of my life for the first X amount of her years in life. And it's difficult. You know, it is difficult.
Mate, and first off, I need to obviously thank you for sharing because I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So that to kind of hear that, but to say that out loud must be an incredibly kind of like painful, but yet
Yeah.
kind of like empowering thing to do. But I also think you need to give yourself a bit of credit here, because
Yeah.
there is not many people that can go through something like that and having that kind of negativity to then turn it into almost like the purpose to be like, I'm not going back to that place, which kind of leads me into that is obviously once you were clean, how did you find that whole kind of process? Obviously, you mentioned all those the
So
12 steps and stuff.
yeah. So obviously I'm racked with a lot of shame.
Mm,
No, not guilt. There's a difference between shame and
yeah.
guilt. I feel guilty when I have a few too many
Mm,
biscuits. Right. It's shame.
yeah.
So every time I used to look at my daughter, I was filled with these feelings of shame. So I would try and get clean, and the feelings, because essentially I use drugs to not feel no more, to take that away, and so I'd be left with these feelings of shame, and I just couldn't handle it or process it. So I'd go back to the same thing that put me in that position in the first place, and that's what they call the cycle of active addiction. And it's a
Okay.
hard cycle to break. Um, but yeah, it was just a really difficult time, and I've heard it from. I'm not alone, but I remember saying to my dad, I said, Dad, this is a very important moment in people, someone that's suffering with addiction. When you have that, it's not a weakness; it's when you surrender. And I remember saying to my dad, I said, I can't stop taking drugs.
Yeah.
It ain't happening. So I need some external support,
Mm,
because it's not going to happen. And I used to write notes, to people in my family, because didn't want to be here no
yeah.
more. I used to run off to hotels, be in there for days. I'd have blood all over my face from the amount of cocaine I was
Yeah.
sniffing. It was just a really desperate time. And I just, I remember one night taking a load of pills. I had to be rushed to hospital. I got to a point where I didn't want to be here
Yeah.
no more. I used to drive around off my box
Yeah.
and hoping I get pulled over.
Yeah.
Never did, thankfully. But I wanted it to be over, and I couldn't work out a way it could be over, other than being locked up and going to prison, or to end my life.
Worse.
Yeah,
When it came to those kind of moments, obviously you kind of talk about them now, like, and they were almost like kind of like proud. Not they're not proud, but like
yeah,
you can look back and like just see like, do you know what, you went through it. You're kind of like, what I get with you, Kieran, is like you own your mistakes. You're like, I
yeah,
know I did it. You almost
yeah,
you take real good kind of like
yeah,
accountability for your actions. When it came to kind of the help and like those early
yeah.
stages,
I went
did
to
you struggle or
Yeah, massively. I went to When I spoke to my dad, I said I can't stop taking drugs. It ain't happening. I want to, but I can't. And for someone that's not going through addiction, that's very difficult to understand. You want to stop, but you can't. I just couldn't stop.
yeah,
So I went. That's when I went to like a rehabilitation centre. Still very wet behind the ears at this point. No idea about addiction or anything like that. And I remember going in, and he was like, "Oh, Kieran, what are you here for?" I said, "Oh, I just want to stop taking cocaine." And he said, "No, Kieran, this is to help address addiction issues." And I went, You're not listening. I can't stop taking
oh
cocaine." And
wow,
he's going, "No, we're going to help your addiction." And I was thinking, "No, he ain't getting it, Dad." I said, "He ain't getting it." I said, "I want to stop taking cocaine so I can go back to drinking."
wow, okay,
I wanted to get
yeah,
back to being able to have a beer without. I was
with all the other
deluded.
stuff, yeah,
Yeah, but I now know what you're saying makes perfect sense. And they're on about this abstinent-based life, but I weren't interested in. I viewed cocaine as the reason why I do what I do. If you take cocaine from me, all of a sudden Kieran's back.
yeah,
I now know that's very false.
mm,
But but my very first day in rehab, it was over in Leicester. They took me to a 12-step fellowship meeting. I go to Narcotics
yeah,
Anonymous. Well, not as much as I should, actually. A lot of people will tell you that I need
yeah,
to go ahead some more. But I went to a meeting, that my very first ever meeting, on a Friday. Um, and I sat there with the rest of the people that are in
mm,
rehab at the time, and someone sat in the circle, and then we talk about how we feel. Someone shared about being in the care of their daughter while sniffing
yeah,
cocaine. Oh, that blew my mind.
mm,
I thought I was the only person in the world who did
yeah,
that. It blew my mind, and I thought my mum and dad had somehow planted him.
yeah. With that though, because I was going to mention this earlier, you
Yeah,
probably see me like trying to chime in. From listening to the podcast itself, you labeled yourself a monster.
Yes.
on an earlier episode
Yeah.
because of that. And it was a question that I kind of had in my mind that I wanted to kind of address with. When you were in that and hearing that back, what was kind of going through your head? Was it a state of panic, or like you just said, like about your parents almost planting someone there?
Yeah.
Like, what was the thought process then when
I
you heard him
felt
say that?
I felt straight away I was in the right place. Although I fighted it for years after, I knew I was in the right place. And in these meetings, they celebrate clean time. So you get a key ring. I don't, in some different fellowships is different, but where I go, you get a key ring. So they celebrate your first meeting, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 6 months, and so on. And this man got up for 30 days, right? And then someone told me it was 30 days in a row. Oh, wow. He hasn't taken drugs for 30 days. I couldn't get my head around it. But I thought, he's just spoke like I speak. He's done that with his daughter as well. If he can do 30 days, maybe I can. And it was, I needed to hear that on that night, but I did resist it because I'm a rebel, I think, at my core. And it's all about how I want to do things, which goes against what recovery is.
Yeah. Would you say that was quite like a pivotal moment into kind of like
100%, yeah.
your recovery journey?
Yeah, 100%. So I did my stint in rehab.
Yeah.
I came out ready to fight the world. I've got all this knowledge now. I haven't used drugs in, I think I was there 6 weeks. I haven't used drugs in 6 weeks. I'm a changed man. I remember giving a spiel to my dad on the whole way home. This is why I do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to go to all the meetings. I'm going to do step work. I'm going to help loads of people in recovery. Get back home. I was on the crest of a wave for a little while. I engaged with the local community in Coventry. First time someone offered me a line of coke, I went to a wedding because I thought I was ready. Someone offered me a line of coke in the toilet, bang.
Square one.
Instantly sniffed it straight away. And that was it. It started all over again. Because I now know I put myself in a vulnerable position going to a wedding after about 6 weeks. And the lad's fault, he didn't know what was going on. He said, "Oh, do you want to," because I was known as Cokehead Kieran.
Yeah.
That's what I was known as.
Wow.
He said, "Yeah, do you want a bit of that?" And all right.
Yeah.
I was at it all over again.
How long was because obviously the period before you went into rehab obviously was over like a number of years.
Yeah.
How long was this stint of kind of using again?
Well, I stopped using December 31st. It was New Year's Eve, 2020. So 21. So that would be I'm 3 years clean on this New Year's Eve.
Amazing.
So that I was in and out of. I was trying my best. I had little snippets of clean time, but everyone was giving me like ideas of how to combat it, and I weren't interested. I was determined to do things my way. And then 2020 hit. We know what happened in 2020.
Yeah, great year.
Yeah. And that's when that was a real bad year for me. I was on drugs really heavily.
Wow.
Real heavily. I went to hypnotherapy. I was trying all these things, trying to look for a reason why I am the way I am. And I got to New Year's Eve. I was drinking Guinness, and it got to about 9 o'clock, and I put the Guinness down. And I just thought, I've had enough. Don't know what it was. Don't know why.
Wow.
I just thought I've had enough, and I put it down, and I haven't had a drop of alcohol since. But I have done quite a lot of work on myself in that time. It wasn't some defined moment, but
that ray of light on you, like this is it.
But when I was very heavily on drugs, I always had this. I used to have these fantasies, not sexual ones.
Yeah,
I probably did. But I ain't got them on this podcast. I ain't ready for that yet. But I used to have this fantasy of creating something to help other people like me, and I'm sniffed up out of my head, and I was thinking about things like that. It was odd.
Yeah,
it was odd, and I remember having this idea in my head about creating this project to help other people. But I couldn't. I was too scared to make it a reality, to make it into words, in case people laughed at me.
Yeah.
So I remember going to my dad. I was probably about 6 to 8 months clean. I said, I want to start a project to help people. And I think he humoured me. I don't think he wanted to say, Kieran, don't worry about it. He sort of humoured the conversation. Then conversations grew. And then we were thinking about who who else I can get involved? This is fictional at the point,
Yeah.
it hasn't happened. It's not reality. And I have two mates, Pete and Sam, and I remember we all sat in a room, the four of us, my dad, Pete, and Sam, and little notepads on the ready, and we discussed how a project would look like. And from that one conversation, what's grew since has grew. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
Mate, it is phenomenal.
Yeah,
Boy, and it's almost like you kind of had to go through that to
yeah,
get to this point. And to be fair, I hadn't even kind of thought about almost like there's a layer of stigma around not only that subject of addiction in general, but when you're kind of it's led by someone with lived experience,
yeah,
that's almost like, well, they're kind of like former addicts. So why would I listen to them? But from listening to the podcast and kind of knowing like you and Pete and the work that you do, it's exactly why you should be listening to them, because they've been at those kind of like points where
definitely.
they were questioning they didn't want to be here anymore. And the
Yeah,
fact that you've gone from rock bottom to now be in a position where you're giving so much back, you're kind of showcasing like these tools, these coping mechanisms, whether it's the gym, breath work, you
yeah.
ice baths now.
Yeah,
It's
I
it's
just want to
phenomenal.
add that that's all holistic stuff. That was not part of my plan when I
Yeah.
created the project. But I've met my girlfriend, my current girlfriend, Kim, through the project, and that's her area. She loves all that holistic stuff, and it's becoming quite a big part of the
Yeah.
project now. Although I do fight it because I don't understand it. I'm like that. I have to understand why you're doing
Yeah.
what you're doing, but it's becoming quite a big part now, and it's but I have such amazing support around me. So this project isn't possible without my mum and dad's support. They have financially supported me
Yeah.
to get it off the ground. It wouldn't be here without Pete has been with me since day dot.
Yeah.
He was there when we had a little notepad and just jotting down notes. Pete left his job as in construction to come and work for the project, and he's been there a year now. I have got Claire, who works for me, who's got such great experience. Got Beth, Cheryl, Lauren, so many
It's a
people.
community now. I
Yeah,
need to ask you a question.
yeah. Go on.
Do you think your parents are prouder now than what they were when you joined the police?
I would say so. Yeah, I would say so.
How does
Um,
that feel?
I feel because now I've got a daughter, I can understand how it makes them
Mm.
feel. They've got a son who doesn't want to be here no more. As a parent, it's hard not to take that
Yeah.
personal. I understand that now. Because I think in today's society, Taylor, it's all about what's wrong with you.
Yeah.
It's never what's happened to you,
Mhm.
and that's what I want to. That someone, if I walk past someone in a doorwell, I don't look at them and go, "What's wrong with that person?" I know what's wrong with them.
Yeah.
What's happened to them? Why are
To
they
get to
they're
that
there?
point.
So I look back and I think back as a little boy and girl, they would have been, running around having a good time. This wouldn't have been in their plan. Something that's gone horribly wrong for that individual. Um, but
But this is what makes the Dynamo Project so important, because you're giving people the tools to find out or even to process the what happened to get to that
Yeah,
point,
and it's a big part is I want to raise awareness around addiction. So the coffee shop, um,
which is beautiful,
yeah,
by the
yeah,
way.
yeah,
The
yeah,
food, the good coffee.
yeah. It is good coffee. Yeah, it is good coffee. But it's a public space. I come out of there, so we might be in group with the residents, and then walk into the coffee shop, and there's a family sat there.
Yeah.
We're trying to help people with addiction and there's families, and it promotes conversation about addiction. Because I think there is a stigma maybe attached to addiction still.
But it's
But
so easy to write someone off though, isn't
of
it?
course it is,
It's
yeah.
like everyone deserves a second chance. Everyone has made mistakes.
But with addicts, second chance might not cut the mustard. It might be the fourth, fifth, eighth, ninth.
Mm,
It's just I I I hear families tell their loved ones, if you use this time, that's it.
yeah.
And I know they're trying to help, but it's probably the worst thing we can say
Mm.
to addicts because it's very difficult just to stop like that. Very difficult.
If there anyone that is listening to this
Yeah.
who is kind of has been where you are or is currently where you used to be, um, what advice would you say?
So you know what Dynamo is? Dedicate yourself now, miracles occur. That's what Dynamo stands for.
Is it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I didn't even know that. I just thought it was just called the Dynamo.
Yeah, dedicate yourself now, and miracles occur.
Wow.
So it's like So I'm going to answer your question. What advice is that? My advice is that you need to reach out for help, but don't expect this to be done for you. You know, you're gonna have. This is going to require a lot of effort and dedication on your part, but it's hard to do it without support and stability around you. That's why our houses are above and beyond. Because some days, and this goes for non-addicts too, some days you need to dig down deep and find that 1% you need to get through that day. And if you're sat in a shithole and you need to find that 1%, you might be lacking it that day. So that's why we make our houses very nice, because they might sit there and go, you know what, I'm going to have to work harder today because I'm going to lose this. So that's why we make the houses so nice. But we build it to tackle addiction, Taylor. You need 4 key cornerstones: health, home, community, and purpose. And that's what we build the project on. If you work well in all 4 areas of them, you've got a really good chance of recovery. But they just need to, there is support out there. They know who we are, and you literally just walk in the coffee shop. I don't care how you word it. I don't care what you say. You just say, I don't care if you come in, I'm fucked. Whatever, however you want to word it, just come in the coffee shop. We can't help everybody, you know. And when we try our hardest not to give that false illusion that we've got the answer to every single problem. We haven't. We do a lot of work with abstinent people that are abstinent. There's organisations that work primarily as service users, do a great job. There's not so much we can do for service users. That's people that are still using. But we can help in every way that we can, and we try our hardest to.
Mate, and you're doing an incredible job
I
of it.
fall short, Taylor. I'm a deeply flawed individual. I fail daily. But despite that, I don't use.
No.
And that's the message.
But you also show up as well.
Yeah.
Despite those tough days. Because I'm a very, very big believer in, like, you can do absolutely anything. The only thing you can't do is give up.
Yeah.
So it's like the fact that you are showing up despite the stigma, despite those bad days, mate, to listen to that, like, from someone who's never kind of been in your position, is inspiring. So the fact that there's people out there who have kind of been in your shoes or are kind of in that position now, that you've got people like yourself, Pete, like the whole team of lived experience, like, it's inspiring.
Yeah. I think it's like, it's impossible to feel 100% every day, but it does not mean you can't give 100% every day. So there'll be days where I don't feel it, but I try and give 100%. I'm 100% in most things, to be honest, if I've got my mind to it. But yeah, all good.
Mate, I've got 2 final questions for you.
Go on.
The 1-year anniversary.
Yeah.
You've got a massive day planned, a lot of celebrations.
Yeah.
Local artists, like, lots going on.
Yeah.
Tell me about it. Where is it? What time?
Our open mics, this was an idea from my girlfriend to have an open mic event once a month. And I think music has a real good way of bringing people together. And in doing so, we can not promote's the wrong word, raise awareness. Don't want to promote addiction, but raise awareness around addiction. And the open mics have got bigger and bigger. So it made sense to celebrate our 1 year with another open mic. And shout out to Alan at the LTB rooms. He's allowed us to
Which is the old Lytton Tree, if anyone's listening to.
It's not a Lytton Tree no more, not a pub. People say, what are you having it in the pub for? And I say, it's not a pub no more.
It's like an art space now, isn't it?
So we've got, we want to celebrate it with an open mic event. It's open to the whole community. It's on this Saturday. And so, yeah, we're really looking forward to it. I'm not looking forward. They want me to go out and do a talk, in front of everybody.
Yeah, you could do it.
I'm all right once I get started. You're saying, Kieran, get off.
It's like an hour and a half later.
Yeah, get off.
Okay, final question.
Yeah.
Obviously, I asked you this at the start. It's a staple now of the Addiction to Recovery podcast. What question are you leaving for your next guest?
Do you believe addiction is as a result of nature or nurture? That's the that's the $1 million question in addiction. Are you born with it, or is it to do with your environment that you grow up on? I don't mean there is an answer to it, but it'd be good to get their opinion.
Yeah.
Nature or nurture?
Well, I was going to sign off the episode, but considering it's your show, do you want to thank people for listening.
I want to thank you, and it's a good experience to do that. And ultimately, the aim of this podcast for me personally today is that people just know me a little bit better. That's it. You know, I'm no better than anyone. I'm no worse than anyone. I'm just, you know, I'm a recovering drug addict, deeply flawed individual, make mistakes daily, but I do try my best to help other people. And
do you think you finally have the answer to who Kieran is now?
I think I'll be always on a journey of self-discovery.
It never ends, does it?
Yeah, I know I'm a troubled person. I'm always, you know, I've had mood swings still, and I have down days. But since I put down drinking drugs, my life has got better, and I know that I am there for my daughter. I show up. I'm there every time. I have a beautiful relationship with my daughter, and when someone asks Freya what your daddy does, I know because I've heard her say he helps people, and that's
Hero.
that's all I want for my daughter is to grow up and be happy that who her dad is, and not to feel ashamed who her dad was, because she grew up in an environment where I was using drugs. It would have been disaster. But thankfully, that's not the case today.
Smashed
And
it.
thank you, Taylor, for interviewing me.
Anytime, you know that. Like, it's an absolute pleasure to kind of
Yeah.
facilitate these kind of conversations. Like, I'm a huge advocate for what you do. And yeah, thank you for kind of being so open and honest with it all.
No problem. Thank you.